If you are not interested in being on tape, you might want to close your camera. But on the other hand, it's very nice for the presenter to have some friendly faces to speak to. We'll ask you to mute until we're ready to take, until we ask you to speak, to take a question or to do a question or a comment. If you have a question or comment, either let us know in the chat or raise your hand or give us some signal that you have a question or comment. And I'll be, as Daniel speaks, I'll be providing some of the mediation so that can happen. One of the things you might want to think about is this is September and it's a big scheduled month. And one of the best parts about it is Daniel Wallace is a big part of it. Aside from tonight, he's going to be coming to Milledgeville on Tuesday, September 21st. And at 7 o'clock in the evening, he's going to do several special events for students, but then at 7 o'clock in the evening, he's going to do an event for the general public that will be also put on streaming on our Facebook page. And we'll be letting all of our virtual friends know what you need to do to get a hold of that. On Thursday, September 16th, Dr. Bruce Gentry will be starting discussion of Flannery O'Connor's Wise Blood. And I know we're all looking forward to getting our teeth into that, her first novel. And that will be at 4:30 and 7. And then on Tuesday, September 14th, just next Tuesday, if you're in Milledgeville, please bring your lawn chairs and non-alcoholic beverages to the front lawn of the college on Hanover Street, and you'll be able to watch the movie Big Fish, which is based on a novel written by our guest tonight, Daniel Wallace. Without further ado, let me introduce Daniel Wallace. He is the J. Ross McDonald Distinguished Professor of English, that's a long title, at UNC Chapel Hill, and director of their creative writing program. He's written a lot of novels, comic and thoughtful at the same time, starting with Big Fish and ending most recently with The Extraordinary Adventure. Big Fish has been made into the movie that we will be seeing on campus next week, as well as a Broadway musical. And I'll let him talk whatever else he feels compelled to say about himself at this point. And why don't you get started, Daniel, and the rest of us will mute our microphones.
Yeah, Irene, thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me here. It's really exciting. As I've told Irene, I don't really give talks. I don't think I've ever given a lecture in my life. So this is going to be more of a series of gestures, of ideas that I've been playing around with lately. In part, or in very large part, because of the book that I just finished and is going to be published by Algonquin Books, who published my first two books. I'm returning there with my same editor, so it's very exciting. But it's my first nonfiction book. I don't want to call it a memoir. It's something a little bit different than that, but it has a lot of the things that you expect from a memoir. It's about my brother-in-law and his influence on me. Through writing this book, I started thinking a lot about influence and what that really means and how do we understand it. And I found that it's really, really complicated. Not nearly as simple as I thought. Until I wrote this book, until I really delved into my history, my past, and my relationship with William, I really didn't know what he was to me. I didn't know what the effect that he had on me. He was my sister's boyfriend when I was 12, and then they were together for the rest of his life, for the next 30 years. And so that's a long time, to be with anybody. But he was an artist. He was a writer. he published 10 books on various adrenaline sports, which he illustrated in beautiful ways, kind of like R. Crumb. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he showed me that it was possible to be a writer. It was possible to work in that world and on the fringes of the culture that I was presented with otherwise. And there were so many other ways that he did influence me. And so in doing this project and in studying my relationship and really studying myself, I also had to take into consideration everything else that made me who I am. The problem with the whole exercise is that I'm less interested in myself than I am in anything else. I don't like to think about who I am, because I don't know. I mean, I think I'm more reserved, and I feel like that's maybe unseemly to think about yourself too much. But obviously, if you're writing something that's like a memoir, you have to do that. Why would I become a writer? This is a question that I get, and writers in general get quite a bit. And I think they get it more so than other professions. People are not as interested, I think, in how other people became who they were. But why in the world would anybody think that it was a good idea to become a writer? It's not anything I ever thought about until the last 3 years when I've been working on this book. To begin, though, I guess I've already begun, but to begin again, I want to show a little 5 minutes of a short film that I adapted from a short story of mine. And it's going to cover some of the themes that I've started to understand, that I'm interested in. And eventually it comes back to Flannery. So it's just a long road to get there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show the first half of this 10-minute short, and then we'll come back to the rest of it toward the end of the talk. So here I go, sharing screen. Where'd you go? Oh, here we are.
I'll never forget the day my father died. A stray bullet, the result of some sort of traditional celebration in which guns were fired into the air. One fell from the sky and into my father's head, killing him instantly. They didn't hate him, they didn't love him, but they didn't even know him. They didn't even know they killed him.
I've always liked you. You know that, don't you?
I'm your son, Dad.
Even so. I guess you know how I lost it, huh?
Lost what?
The leg!
You said a whale? It was flying?
That was just a story. In actual point of fact, I lost it in a card game.
Card? You said card game? You bet your leg on a card game.
You'll never understand. Those were different days. When men were men, cards were cards, and men played card games for keeps. Most of my friends had lost some body part or other, an eye, an ear, a couple of fingers more often than not, but sometimes teeth.
How'd you like that?
I love it. One of the people we played with, he was a doctor. Performed the surgery then and there. It was a rough game, but you knew that going in. Don't bet your leg unless you're prepared to lose it.
I'll have one of these.
I don't think I know. I would never, under any circumstances, bet my leg or any body part in a card game, Dad.
That's something a father longs to hear. My father. He didn't give a shit if I had legs or not. He never tried to teach me what to bet on or what not to bet on. So when the time came, I was completely unprepared. I bet the leg. It was a Saturday night, 2 a.m. The room was so smoky it felt like we were playing cards in the clouds. I was on a roll. It didn't matter what I played. I won a $100 pot with a pair of threes. People couldn't read me. By midnight, I was up $750. I thought about leaving and taking my winnings and buying something special for myself. A nice bottle of scotch, a warm pair of socks. I decided to quit when I hit 1,000. I won the next hand. Montana Rojo, roll your own. Grand total, 962 American dollars. One more hand and that was it. I was out of there. The dealer chose my favorite game, 7-card stud. This is the game I was born to play, son. I'd never lost a hand of stud. Everybody folded, except for one man. De Soto Moriarty, we called him.
Wait, why would you call him that?
Because that was his name. De Soto knew how to play a game of cards. We kept at it, raising each other until we'd gone through all our money.
Call.
Call. So soon.
Oh, maybe I'm just tired of winning.
Well, if you really had something, you'd be willing to bet more than money. Me, for instance, I know I've got you beat. That's why I'm betting my thumbs. Both of them.
Pick a leg.
Right.
Wait, you bet your leg with a 2-pair?
I was young. I was reckless.
So we'll come back to that later. But what I love about this little short film is how it reflects so much of what I'm interested in, the father-son relationship, humor, I love, and not just, I shouldn't say that because I wrote it, but it's, it does reflect who I am. And it also, how to say this? Well, it reflects my interest in body parts and the loss of them. It's all about, when I start to think about it, as I've indicated, I've been thinking so much about it. Why am I me? When I was starting out writing in my 20s, I wrote a lot of bad novels. I wrote 5 or 6 books that never been published and never will be published, thank goodness. But I made the mistake of showing them or showing one specifically to my father, who was a very successful businessman. And he read it and said, you know, you're not really setting the world on fire with this, are you? And I said, I don't, you know, I'm not setting anything on fire, really. And he said, why can't you write a book like this? And he was a big reader. He'd in his youth, especially, but when he was traveling, he traveled all the time. He was one of the guys on the plane reading the books that we see people writing on planes reading. And he pulled out a Tom Clancy novel and said, why can't you write a book like this? And I said, really honestly, you know, if I could do that, I would do that. I would, if I could write one book that could set me up and allow me to write all the other books that I really wanted to write, I would do it. And you know, how can I say that? Why can't I write in a certain way and not write in other ways? I have some facility with the language. I should, I think, hypothetically be able to do that, but I can't. And the reason I can't is because of the specific influences that are beyond my control and often are the result of just pure happenstance. Ann Patchett wrote an essay recently, I think it was in Harper's Magazine, and she touches on influence. And she says, when I was young, I read the books that were available, not the books that were appropriate. I read what my mother and stepfather left lying around, which meant I read Updike, Roth, Bellow, but especially Updike. His sentences, his characters, his imperatives filled my brain when my brain was soft and at its most impressionable. Along with Bellow and Roth, he was my influence, the person who had made me want this job in the first place. So that to me underlined a very weird happenstance, coincidence, just bare bones chance of influence determining who you are and who you're going to be. Writing is interesting to people who may not write stories for a few obvious reasons. All the arts are forms of expression, obviously, and writing stories may be the most democratic form of art of any of them. Everybody can write in one way or another. It's like competitive walking or something, you know, something that everybody can do, and there's a feeling, I think, of why do you feel as if you can bring something new to the game that somebody else hasn't brought or that anybody else can bring? This is a question that I've had to ask myself as I've been learning about myself through the course of writing this memoir. Influence is what directs and controls us. Writers, visual artists, musicians are all subject to influence to a greater degree than people in other professions, I believe, and can be created and possibly undermined by it. There's so much we read, hear, experience, and it all comes to rest somewhere, usually where we least expect it. This brings me to the educational portion of the program. I want to talk about something that you're probably, many of you have some probably more experience with than I do, but it's something called the anxiety of influence. And it's based primarily on the critic Carol Bloom, his belief that there's no such thing as an original poem or story, that every new composition is simply a misreading or misinterpretation of an earlier one, and that influence is unavoidable and inescapable. All writers inevitably, to some degree, adopt, manipulate, or alter or assimilate certain aspects of the content or subject matter, literary style, or form of their predecessors. He contends that it can prove detrimental and that this influence instills in young writers a type of unease, apprehension, or anxiety as they psychologically struggle against past literary forebears to create something definitive and original and achieve literary recognition and success. This was my experience, very vividly put, with many of the writers that I were reading when I was growing up, but mainly many very, very serious issue I had was with Flannery O'Connor, or maybe it was her issue with me. As I was writing those first books, I could, and I'm not exaggerating, I could feel the presence of the ghosts of writers who I wanted to emulate, standing behind me, disapproving of what I was doing. You can't help but be a sponge as a young writer and soak up the whoever it is that you're reading. And if you're drawn to somebody with fervor, you want more than anything to be that person. You want to write like her. So what you don't know as a young writer is that it's impossible. And as you try to pursue that, you only become more frustrated and in a way sadder and feel like your quest is impossible. As you can see, I think, in part by the film, part of the film that we saw, there is this pervasive, pervasive interest in this idea of people who are trying to fill, like Faulkner said, trying to fill the lacks, who are missing something. And in many cases, it's the physical. It's something that's very evident. You have the wooden legs and the glass eyes. Flannery O'Connor, by herself, could not, I don't believe, could have instilled that that affection, I would say, that I have for this, for this, I don't know how to put it, but this is affection for people who are in the world with missing pieces. It has to, influence has to be, in my experience, are things that collide, that come together. And with me, on the one hand, it was Flannery O'Connor and her stories, but on the other, it was something that happened to me in 6th grade in Birmingham, Alabama, where I was from. I started a new school in 6th grade, and my next door neighbor was starting the same school. His name was Frank. And we were in the same homeroom. And a couple of times a week, he would raise his hand and say, Mrs. Flowers, may I go wash my eye? Because it turned out Frank had a glass eye, and my teacher had never seen one before, and a student, and nobody had ever seen one before, but occasionally he had to go wash his eye. And she said, of course, Frank, you may go wash your eye. And then he would say, can Danny come? And she didn't know whether it was a 2-boy procedure or not, how the cleaning of the eye actually went. So she said, of course, Danny can go with you. And Frank and I got up, went to the boys' room, and this is the process that would happen every week, twice a week. He would turn on the water. He would get a paper towel out of the dispenser on the wall. Then he would take his eye out of his head and put it in his hand and put it under the water, washing it off, and then dry it with the paper towel and put it back in his head. He didn't need me for the process at all, but he just wanted company while he did it. At the end of that year, he disappeared, and I never saw him again. I looked for him all over the place online, and then one day my wife found him, and as luck would have it, he lived in the same town where I was going to do the last talk I was scheduled to do before COVID shut us all down in March. I wrote him. I told him the story of his glass eye and how it had affected my work. When you see Big Fish, you'll see an aspect of that in there, all throughout the story. So I told him all about that. I met him at a lunch place, and I can't tell you how moving this was. He pushed a little box across the table, as you would if it were a wedding ring. And I opened the box, and it was one of his glass eyes. So Frank, the way I see it and the way that I've understood it through my exploration of myself, collided with Flannery O'Connor, or the Flannery O'Connor that I would read later, when I was in high school and college. And those two things came together to inspire this affection I have for the subject matter that I have. That is the nature of influence. And it's some, some influence are stronger than others. I mean, you could look at everything that a writer reads and see that as being some sort of influence. We can talk about Italo Calvino, Isabel Allende, Garcia Marquez, Walker Percy, Harper Lee. These are all people who are part of my lineage as a writer, but in the expression of what happens when I sit down and write, Flannery O'Connor, I feel like is preeminent among them. She was very scary to me in literarily, and also the ghost of her that I felt behind me, until she became friendlier to me, and until I was able to write in a place where I felt like I wasn't embarrassing her. Then, only then did she become a kind of a friendly ghost to me. She's not here now, by the way. She's pretty much gone. So my stories involve freaks, or what people consider freaks, or people with differences, because of her, because of Frank. I was reading her. I was thinking about it in a very general way, but as I was reading her, to prepare for this, to the degree that I have, I I was reading some of her stories over, and I came to Good Country People. I just stumbled upon it, actually, as I was going through. And, I remembered the story very well, but not as well as I thought I had, because I got to the end of the story, close to the end of the story, when they're in the barn and he takes her leg, and she says, "Give me my leg," she screeched. He jumped up so quickly that she barely saw him sweep the cards in the blue box into the Bible and throw the Bible into the valise. She saw him grab the leg, and then she saw it for an instant slanted forlornly across the inside of the suitcase with a Bible at either side of its opposite ends. He slammed the lid shut and snatched up the valise and swung it down the hole and then stepped through himself. When all of them had passed but his head, he turned and regarded her with a look that no longer had any admiration in it. "I've gotten a lot of interesting things," he said. "One time I got a woman's glass eye this way. And you needn't to think you'll catch me, because Pointer ain't really my name. I use a different name at every house I call at and don't stay nowhere long. And I'll tell you another thing, Holga," he said, using the name as if he didn't think much of it. "You ain't so smart. I've been believing in nothing ever since I was born." And then the toast-colored hat disappeared down the hole. The girl was left sitting on the straw in the dusty sunlight. When she turned her churning face toward the opening, she saw his blue figure struggling successfully over the speckled lake. So this was a revelation to me. It's this process of understanding, this accidental process of influence, and the accidental process of actually understanding the influence. So the question that I would have to ask is, did she give me permission to write what I was already passionate about, what was already simmering inside me? So with that, I want to show you, if you're interested, I hope you are, in the rest of the film. Trigger alert. It gets, well, you'll see.
Louis, I just don't understand. I mean, why would that man even want your leg? What did he do with it once he had it?
That was his business. After the doctor cauterized the wound, I said goodbye to the leg and never thought about it again. It was DeSoto's now. And the son of a bitch carried it around with him everywhere. That's why I eventually stopped playing with those guys. I couldn't stand the smug smile on his face and the way he rested his hand on my kneecap.
What a story. I mean, on one hand, you were really stupid, but on the other hand, you were also pretty brave. I mean, I would have never done anything like that. Stakes are way too high.
Well, that's the way it goes. You win big, you lose big. Losing is the worst. But winning, there's nothing like it.
Wait, but what did you win?
Oh. All right, that should do you, Eddie. Change the bandages twice a day, and try to stay off your feet for 3 weeks. Tammy, show him to the street, will you?
I'm not going anywhere. This game isn't over.
I couldn't end the night a loser, son.
Deal me in, Carl.
3 toes. All in. Left leg. I'll raise your kidney.
I'll see your kidney, and I'll raise your kidney.
What? You're crazy. I'm not betting both kidneys.
And I guess I win.
Okay. Both elbows.
No.
God damn it, not now. My wife just started working nights. Now I'm stuck here with a kid. Would you gentlemen excuse me? I'll be right back.
Wait a second. Is that a boy or a girl?
Tammy. Bring me the kid.
Four aces, king high. Best hand I ever had. Are you telling me I never told you that story? Your story?
And that's when it happened. The man I called my father, tiny already, shrunken with age, and the weight of his many adventures, slumped over in a bloodless moment of the purest finality. To this day, I think he was my father, but I would never bet on that.
1, 2, 3. Well, I've been as I woke this morning on the cold ground by the sea. And I open up my eyes and those black clouds are all I see. And I wonder if someone up there.
So I would apologize on 2 counts. One, I'm sorry that this talk wasn't more focused in a deep sort of in a deep way on Flannery, and also that I'm not 100% sure that anything that I've really said tonight is true. I think that in order to understand ourselves, we invent ourselves and we look for clues in our past. And this is what I've come up with, but I'm not secure in the idea that it's actually true. So 2 apologies. And now I would be happy to talk to you about anything you'd like to discuss.
Can I start, Daniel?
Mhm.
Because I'm so glad you brought up this topic in that it always fascinates me how, this is an audience that is pretty much sold on the goodness of Flannery O'Connor. But when you talk with people who don't like Flannery O'Connor, it is exactly what you have just noted, this sort of oddity of the freaks of, let me put that in quotation marks, because I don't really think they're freaks. I mean, I think part of it is that we all miss something and some of it's more physical than others.
Right.
But how do you write a book for others where you're talking about people who people don't want to admit that they're like?
Yeah. That's such a great question, because I've always felt that people in general have are interested in things that they don't feel like they have permission to feel about. So, for instance, one of the towns that I grew up in, my grandparents had lived in Coleman, Alabama, and it's north of Birmingham. It's much smaller, obviously, than Birmingham. So it's a smaller town. And what you notice in smaller southern towns is that people who have physical ailments of one kind or another are not sequestered. They're not in a house by themselves. They are in the world. And in Coleman, people, there was one woman, who had one side of her face was paralyzed. And this is actually in the book, Big Fish. I used her in the book. And half of her face is one sort of went up, one went down. There was another man who, when he was a kid, was in the passenger seat of a car, and he was going down the road and sticking his arm out the window, feeling the breeze, and the car sped into a fence post and completely shattered his arm. And so his hand actually came out of his sleeve because the rest of the arm had shrunk. And it's in the small towns, I think it's that this is not something that's abnormal or that's seen as abnormal. And I honestly believe that if you are given permission to think something, you're much, you don't set up these walls of distaste because you have freedom to do it. I can't imagine anybody, honestly. I guess I can imagine it, but the thing about Flannery O'Connor is that everything she did, she looked at with a stark, honest eye, and wrote about things with bravery, and that's obviously something else that I was trying to do. This is life. You're right. They're not freaks. I think people can see them as freaks, but I've always been drawn to people whose exteriors reflect what many of the rest of us have inside of us. That we, what people in what is it called? It's not disabled anymore, but they would call people like me the temporarily able-bodied. And so, and I've written stories about that too. This sense that what is external on these people is actually internal on the rest of us.
It's such an interesting point, because the Holga character is based on somebody who lived in Milledgeville, and Pete Puckett was Vera Puckett when they were in high school together, Flannery O'Connor and Vera, and she had lost her leg in a hunting accident, and then there was a point where she started wearing men's clothing and decided just to be Pete Puckett. And it's interesting just talking to people from the town, because I don't know what it is about small southern towns, but that was just Pete Puckett. It wasn't, I've told other people that story who are sort of sophisticated Easterners who think, oh, that that must be beyond the pale for people. No, it's just Pete. That was just Pete. What is there in a small southern town that allows that to occur?
Yeah. What is it? I think it's you're right. The community is so much smaller and intimate in a way. We're more closely tied to each other because we don't go anywhere. I was reading something about the 1930s when cars, cars didn't always have tops on them. They were always open. But once cars were totally enclosed, that allowed people to drive away. It was like a portable room, and it was never that way before. And it allowed people to leave the community and go to places that were private and away from the eye of everybody else. And that is something obviously in the cities was this is, I mean, cars were responsible in many ways for the breakup of community. But in the smaller towns, I believe that there was less of that, and there was a more familial atmosphere. If it was your child, you wouldn't see them that way. You wouldn't. You don't see somebody for the thing they don't have. You see them for what they do have.
Are there other questions people have of Daniel? This has been very interesting, thinking about how we influence or get influenced. Oh, Victoria, you're going to need to unmute. Hi.
Okay.
Hi. I had a friend for years and years, very Southern, and from Mayweather. And when he was a little boy, he got into his 10-year older brother's chemistry kit, and got acid in his eye, one of his eyes, and was so afraid of getting in trouble for getting into his brother's chemistry set that he didn't say anything. He kept covering it up. Anyway, he ended up losing his eye, and it had to be enucleated, and he ended up with a glass eye. And one night we were all at a party at a friend's house, and he was staying the night, and he took the eye out. Apparently he really wasn't supposed to be able to do that, but he did. And lost his glass eye.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Somewhere in the basement of our friend's house. And he hunted and he hunted and he hunted, and they hunted and hunted. Nobody ever knew what happened to that eye.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I was just, it is just, well, he did it with his teeth later on.
Wow. But imagine the person who found that eye.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Weeks or months or years later.
Ages hence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody will have bought that house.
Mm-hmm. An eye. Yes. Yeah, I think
that eye.
Eyes are actually, I mean, it's so interesting to me because if you've ever seen a glass eye, and I'll bring one with me. I'll bring one to Milledgeville, because I didn't include this, and I could have included this in what I was just talking about, but not only do I write about them, but I ended up being a real collector of glass eyes. And so I have about 75 glass eyes. I have enough for everybody here. And but I'll bring one with me. There's such a fragile, your face is so important. And a friend of mine had a glass eye, and it became so embarrassing for him that, believe it or not, he got a patch.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if you're trying to hide something that makes you different, it's an odd choice to get a patch, but it really suited him. He really wore that patch and he made it work.
Other questions, comments?
Well, if there are no more questions, I want to say I'm really looking forward to coming down to Milledgeville. I've always wanted to go, and I'm really I'm hoping to get to Andalusia, and it's yeah, I think I definitely will. So
Jordan is here, and he will be sure to give you your tour, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Let me. I'm gonna put my number in the chat, so you can call me, and if we can get together, and we can make a it might be easier on chat. But anyway, there's my number.
Okay.
Thanks.
And what we can do is just make sure that you get to see all the interesting parts of Milledgeville you want to. We also have a very interesting insane asylum here.
Yeah. Can I go there? Is that what this is?
Can.
Is this an intervention? This is an intervention, I guess.
You can't, but this is sort of like one of the weird parts of Milledgeville, when people get to know you and take you on the tour. One of the things you get taken to is the asylum.
Oh, that's fun. Can you do that, Jordan?
I can. I've definitely given plenty of students tours of the Central State. Back they used to have like part of it open for. I actually got a tour back when they did tours, and they had a museum there. So they actually had like a lot of the instruments in the museum and straitjackets and all sorts of weird stuff.
No more.
Yeah, no.
Don't they have some of the stuff at the antique shop downtown? I went there last week and I was very concerned.
The thing I would like to find is they had a record, I want to say from the late 60s, that the patients they did a Christmas record. And so this used to be in the museum, was this piano and this Christmas record. And I was like, I have a dark sense of humor, so I was like, oh man, that would be awesome to hear. Yeah.
Well,
Like
we also
What?
Victoria?
Etiquette Follies.
Almost. Yeah.
About,
Yeah, I remember that one about about Massachusetts. Yeah.
right.
That was
Irene.
Yeah, Chim.
they used to have, I guess, I don't know whether it was a museum or a chamber of horrors or what at the hospital, but they had exhibits that related to patients and some of their sicknesses. Also, there was a huge jar with a many feet long tapeworm that had been removed from a patient. Did you see that? Is it still around?
Well, this was
a very large container of metal objects that a patient had swallowed. And
I did it, Chan, like in 2007 or 2006. I mean, they've closed that museum up, a long time ago. But yes, I remember the tapeworm. I remember because they had developed like a this is awful. They developed like a frontal lobotomy there. So they had stuff from that. Like they had all sorts of weird stuff.
that I don't remember. I just remember the tapeworm and the bottle and the huge jar of bent forks and spoons and other things that the patient had swallowed. That actually has a name, a patient that a person that swallows all kinds of odd
Yeah.
things has a name, which I can't remember. But
Blue-
anyway,
our friend at Blue Argo also has a question for you, Daniel. So
Yeah.
I do. Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
yes,
Can you guys, okay. In the film clip, I was really interested in the decision that the director made to stop the action and do it in this little staccato burst of pictures of people. It slightly throws me off balance to see that, and breaks up the action a certain way. What exactly, was that to add to the grotesquerie, or why was that decision made to film it that way?
So which part exactly are you talking about? So I can have it on my head. Which?
Well, instead of having, at least on my device, instead of continuous action, it was frozen pictures.
Oh, you know what happened, I think, is that maybe the streaming, the file was too big and the streaming stopped and then it had to buffer. Did it stop at a place that was really grotesque?
Well, no, it was just that the version that I saw of it would show one picture for 5 seconds, and then there would be another picture for 5 seconds. And I thought that was a deliberate decision of the director. And I thought, this is really interesting. Why?
That's so funny because you can interpret mistakes. It's like playing jazz piano. You know, you make a mistake and suddenly it's not a mistake. But yeah, that's all about the streaming, and that it just came in slower on your end. If you wanted to see it, if you have a good connection, it's on my website. You can watch it on there. It's danielwallace.org. So you can see it on a good connection and see that they don't actually do that.
I would like to do that. Thank you.
Yeah.
thank you so much, Daniel. We're at 9 o'clock, and I think it's been a great evening, and we really appreciate getting to meet you ahead of time before getting a preview before you come to visit us in Milledgeville.
I'm really looking forward to it. And Jordan, if you can text me your number, if I'll give you my time schedule and everything.
Okay, great.
Thank you guys. I had
right,
fun. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.